complicated because there are strong differences of view about what should happen next. There's one part of the U.S. government, and I think President Trump has this view that the war should end based on a set of criteria that include no enlargement of NATO to Ukraine so that Ukraine becomes a clearly defined neutral state. Second, that some territories shift to Russia, including Crimea, and at least parts of some other territories of Ukraine. And third, that security arrangements not be based on European troops in Ukraine after the conflict. Now, that view is opposed by other parts of the U.S. government, which say that the fighting should continue to get better terms for Ukraine. Many European countries oppose that kind of settlement because they also want the war to continue, ostensibly for better terms for Ukraine. My feeling is that President Trump is absolutely accurate about how this war should end, and the hardliners, as I'll call them, the ones that think that the war should continue for better terms for Ukraine, would end up destroying Ukraine. Because on the battlefield, if this war continues, Russia will win, and that is a reality. Of course, Russia will win at extremely high costs to both Ukraine and to Russia and to the world. So it's better win-win for everybody that the war ends. But there are hardliners and there are ones that want to make an agreement. In this case, President Trump wants the agreement. He wants concessions by Ukraine. And I think he's completely right in this.
Summary: Professor Jeffrey Sachs outlines the differing views within the U.S. government on the Ukraine conflict. He highlights President Trump's stance that the war should end with Ukraine as a neutral state, no NATO enlargement, territorial concessions to Russia, including Crimea and parts of other territories, and security arrangements without European troops in Ukraine. Sachs notes opposition from U.S. and European hardliners who want the war to continue for better terms for Ukraine. He argues that continuing the war would destroy Ukraine, as Russia would likely win on the battlefield, and supports Trump's push for a settlement to avoid further losses for all parties. Takeaway: Sachs advocates for a swift end to the Ukraine conflict through a negotiated settlement based on Ukrainian neutrality and territorial concessions, aligning with Trump's position. He warns that prolonging the war risks Ukraine's destruction and emphasizes Russia's likely battlefield victory, framing continued fighting as detrimental to all parties. Analysis: Sachs presents a polarizing perspective, framing the conflict as a result of NATO's provocative expansion toward Russia's borders, a view that aligns with Russian narratives but diverges from mainstream Western discourse. His assertion that Trump's proposed terms, neutrality, territorial concessions, and no European troops, are a practical solution reflects a realist approach to international relations, prioritizing de-escalation over ideological commitments to Ukraine's sovereignty or NATO aspirations. However, his claim that Russia will inevitably win on the battlefield oversimplifies the complex dynamics of the war, including Ukraine's resilience with Western support and the significant costs Russia has incurred, e.g., economic sanctions, military losses. Sachs' dismissal of U.S. and European hardliners as misguided ignores their strategic concerns about appeasing Russian aggression, which could embolden further expansionism. His argument also sidesteps the moral and legal implications of territorial concessions, particularly for Ukraine, which may view them as capitulation. The internal U.S. division he describes, between Trump's peace push and hardliner resistance, highlights the challenge of achieving a unified Western policy, especially under a Trump administration skeptical of prolonged U.S. involvement. Conclusion: Sachs' perspective underscores the urgency of a negotiated end to the Ukraine conflict, driven by pragmatic concerns about Ukraine's survival and broader global costs. While his alignment with Trump's proposed terms offers a clear path to de-escalation, it risks oversimplifying the geopolitical stakes and underestimating Ukraine's agency and Western resolve. The segment sets the stage for a contentious debate, as subsequent speakers challenge Sachs' assumptions, revealing deep divides in how the conflict's resolution is perceived. The feasibility of Trump's terms depends on whether Ukraine and its allies can accept concessions without undermining international norms, and whether Russia is willing to negotiate in good faith, a question left unresolved in this section.